Okay, so a few things for just some background information. When we have an MOU at the top of any of our TAs, that's just to be clear. That is, we understand that this is what we've agreed to so far, but none of that language is binding until we've ratified the whole contract, right?
Correct.
Okay. Is that necessary to have at the top of all of our TAs? I noticed Article 21 and Article 23 don't have that language. So you know how necessary it was.
I mean, I'll defer to Olivia. I don't think it's critical. I think we're just attempting to make sure that we're TAing each piece individually because we're not TAing it all at once. So I mean, I think as long as we mutually agree on whatever the format is going to be, I don't think it's a huge deal. But again, I would defer to Olivia if she has any particular thoughts on it.
No, I mean, I think that's fine.
Okay. It was just something that struck out to me, so I figured I'd ask to make sure there was an issue we can get that fixed ASAP. Okay, so we have two articles to present to you today. You indicated that you guys wouldn't have any, and that's fine by us. We have Articles 7 and 10, so workload and stipends. I'll get those sent over to you in just a minute, but first I'm going to give a really quick presentation about where we're at. We did this last time. We gave you guys Articles 7 and 10, and I felt it wise to just kind of revisit and make sure that you guys understood what page we're on as we're working towards this. So let me share this real quick. Is that showing you guys the wrong screen? Okay.
I think we see presenter mode, Austin.
Okay. Is that better now?
Yeah.
Okay. So stipends and workload. So this is a very similar to the presentation Sikander gave you guys in February when we gave this last time. So our first proposal, every time we give a stipend, is a living wage. We defend that GAs deserve a living wage. We're not going to back down from that front. We know what our workers need to survive. And so that's always going to be our first proposal. Obviously, this is a second proposal. We want to make sure that we are working with you to make a solution that works for everybody. But our first point is that point. That is always our goal. We continue to see Article 7 and 10 as inherently linked. When it comes to workloads, I mean, we are overworked, and when it comes to stipends, we are underpaid. So when we are getting hit on both fronts, it's something that we tie together very easily, and it's something that we want to work to make sure that our workers are being treated as fairly as possible. Last year, it was indicated when we were doing stipends increases that because we're on a 0.5 FTE status, that we don't deserve a living wage. 0.5 FTE, while it's technically not full-time in terms of 40 hours a week, that is full-time for our international GAs, and that's full-time for many of us. And for most of us, 0.5 FTE is just kind of a number. It doesn't really equate to much in the real world. Doesn't equate to how many hours we're normally working. And so that is full-time for us. And we defend that we deserve a living wage regardless of that FTE status. Now, without this definition of workload, as we've been trying to get established, prosecuting a workload grievance is very difficult. We have no line dividing academic work between paid work, and that's something that is a huge oversight in our contract and something that needs to be ratified ASAP. And that's something that we're going to be pushing for, and you'll see in our proposals that we're going to continue to try to push for a definition. The University of Florida cannot rely on our unpaid labor and also use our part-time status kind of against us as we are working for you guys. Obviously, we're working and getting degrees at the same time, but that does not diminish the fact that we are professionals coming in with degrees, and we're working to get a higher degree, but we're also doing specialized work. We are salaried. We are doing specialized work. We have specialized degrees, and we are doing work that cannot be done by everyone. We know that our jobs and our academic life are inherently linked. They're intertwined, and it's hard to draw that dividing line. And that's why it's up to us to establish what that line will be and how that line will be established, because we don't want any GAs to be overworked. Obviously, I don't think anyone wants people working over their contracted hours on either side of the table here. And I think it benefits all of us to make sure we know what the line is so that GAs can have a healthy academic life, a healthy work life, and a healthy home life. And like I said before, 0.5 FTE is really in name only. We're going to need a lot of work to make sure that that is something that has a basis in real life. So I've got a couple of graphs for you here. A couple of these you guys may have seen before, a couple of them pretty new. So at the top left graph here, we have our stipend as it stands today, the stipend as it was per year, and the minimum wage in the state of Florida. So for our current stipend, we've backtracked it so we can see how our current stipend equates in terms of buying power. And you can see as we go back to 2017, yeah, our stipend is, higher now than it was there in real terms, but in terms of actual buying power, it has decreased over time. And so we are, we've gotten raises over the past few years, yes, and they have been historic raises, in terms, but we've also had historic inflation. And we, with a historic rise in the cost of living, our stipend just isn't cutting it. If you look at the bottom left graph, you'll see just kind of the stipend as it currently states versus the minimum wage per year. And you can see, in 2017 and 2018, our stipend was a little healthy amount above what the minimum wage is in the state of Florida. But in the last few years, it has dipped to be below or at parity with the minimum wage. And while there is nothing wrong with employees who have to work at a minimum wage, we are specialized, we have specialized degrees, and we deserve more than minimum wage for our GAs. We do specialized work, and they deserve to be compensated to match that. If you look at the right-hand side, you'll see kind of a very similar analysis, but with the cost of living. So you can see as the cost of living has been rampantly increasing in Gainesville, our stipend has not been increasing to match that. In 2017 and 2018, we were very close to the cost of living. We still weren't at it, but we were closer to that 90% metric. And as of 2024, we are at 61% of the cost of living. And, that's nothing that the University of Florida controls. They don't control the cost of living in Gainesville, but it's something that we have to live with. It's something that all GAs that come here have to live with. And it's something that the university should understand is a huge consideration on whether or not GAs are employed and choose the University of Florida is if they can afford it. And just judging by these metrics alone, it's getting harder and harder to afford it. And that's why we're here to make sure that we can fix that before it gets too low and before we have further issues retaining GAs. So we have to ask, can the University of Florida afford to give GAs raises? UF admin over the past few years has received salary increases of over 10%. Over the last 9 years, the University of Florida has had a positive change in its net position for all of the last 9 years. And this means their assets have increased by $2.5 billion over that span. And the net position has increased by $1.85 billion over this span. So the University of Florida has more money. It is worth more than it was in 2017. Yet after inflation, after the cost of living, GAs are making less than ever. So that money is being made off of the backs of GAs being underpaid, and it's something that we need to address. We have a former president famously getting over $1 million per year while not serving as president, and that is something that is quite frankly insane to hear as a GA, to be told that our work is not valued enough to be paid a living wage. But we do have someone who, until they take a full-time position elsewhere, they can receive over $1 million of our funding in their pocket. And that's not something that we see as a very positive light. I'll say it that way. The University of Florida over this past year has also announced several ways to, help increase the pay of non-GAs. Faculty and staff, it was announced they got a merit raise pool of 4% and 3.75% of their annual salaries. And, tenured faculty, if they were exceptional in the post-tenure review, they got a $10,000 bonus. And I don't, diminish these groups of employees. They obviously do deserve these raises and these pools. But this is not something that happens in a vacuum. This happens because the University of Florida has so much, spare overhead cash that they are in such a positive light that they can't afford to do these things. And, you know, when you take these numbers and you take the amounts that are being given out to these groups, and then you see your last proposal where you gave us a $500 increase, which is, you know, a decrease in pay after inflation, you can understand kind of where we're coming from, where we're not very, you know, we were disappointed with the last proposal, and it's something that I think we have a long way to work for, and work towards finding something that works for both of us. So can the University of Florida raises, based off the metrics you can find, based off the amount of money they have going to retain these groups? The answer is yes. They can afford raises, and so, you know, that's something we consider. Now, is the University of Florida financially secure? And, you know, this isn't anything we're saying. This is, you know, by S&P, by the Board of Trustees chair, by the interim president. University of Florida has an exceptional position, in a strong position to do great things. You know, it has exceptional market position, track record of surplus operations in the past few years, and exceptional balance sheet metrics. And, you know, its debt rating was changed to positive, and, you know, this is not something that we can ignore. It's not something that we think should be ignored. It's a very positive thing for the University of Florida, but we think that should reflect on the, you know, amount of pay that GAs get. If the University of Florida is such, you know, has such a positive outlook, then it shouldn't be, you know, afraid of paying GAs what they're worth. So is UF financially secure? The answer is a resounding yes. We look at the metrics for the past 9 years. We see only increases in the net position. We see a great debt rating. We see very strong statements coming out of the University of Florida. We see great extra funds being sent to other parts of employment. And we think that we are worthy of also getting that employment. We know we are. So I'm going to send these proposals to you in a minute, but here's a brief overview of where we're at. For Article 10, we put a stipend of $39,000 a year for a 12-month, or $29,250 for a 12-month. That is a $2,600 decrease from last time. After you guys gave us a $500 increase, we said we would take the bullet and we would go down even lower to make sure you guys know we were taking this seriously. We have also conceded and are working with an effective date of October 1st. That was not an easy decision for us. It's something that you know, it took a lot of discussions to make sure we agreed with it. As you recall, last time we were pushing for a January 1st effective date, which we thought would be reasonable. And then we didn't get a proposal for 6 months from your team. And so, you know, October 1st, we're not happy about it, but we're willing to concede on that point and work with October 1st from this point on to make sure that we can get off to a good foot and we can get things going. We've added clauses in there to make sure that the minimum stipend raises as the J1 visa requirements raise. Now, the J1 visa, I'm not sure how familiar you are with how it works, but the J1 visa every year, the University of Florida requires a minimum amount of funding that you can prove you have to make sure that you can keep your visa. For 2024, it is $27,192. So while the minimum stipend we are set at, we think every 9-month employee should be able to afford that that funding requirement. And so right now we're above that limit. We're at $29,250 for a 9-month. But, you know, with inflation, with that number probably set to rise over previous years, we want to make sure for the life of this contract that our 9-month minimum stipend remains at least at that J1 funding requirement. For the merit raise pool, we have not changed any of our previous things. We have 5.6% of the GA salary pool, $2,300 for a 12-month employee and $1,725 for a 9-month employee, with an effective date of October 1st. And then the big change here is I added language similar to how we worked with health insurance. We worked with you guys to get that implemented as soon as possible, to work on implementing these changes as soon as we can get a TA. Now, I'm not sure how the process works for your end, but last time we TA'd and we went to ratification, it took an additional 3 months. If we're willing to concede and go to October 1st, we think if we can get a TA done as soon as possible, that grads should be able to get paid as soon as possible and not have to wait another quarter of the year to get that money. And so we've put language in there. I've modified it slightly to match Article 10. But we can talk about them more when we get to the proposal itself. And this goes to calculate a cost of $47 million. Obviously, that's a rough estimate. You guys will do your own estimates. That's around $10 million less than our last proposal for consideration. Article 7, we removed language that used the word average to define overwork. We think average was not a word done in poor intentions, but when it comes to especially international GAs, they are in violation of their visa if they go over 20 hours a week for a single week. It's not a long-term average, and we want to make sure that there's no issues and that those international students are protected. So the word average just doesn't work in this context for us. We kept our definition distinctive workload from academic work. We've worked to make sure that there is a path to a grievance in case workload has been is over their assigned FTE. We have very similar things that we had before, where they can request clarifications of their FTE, and then they have the University of Florida has multiple ways in able to make sure those GAs are taken care of if they're found to be overworking. And departments must review and report workload expectations every year, every time within any letter of appointment, and whenever GA duties like class assignments change. We want to make sure that it is very clear what is expected of GAs and what that equates to in an FTE basis to make sure that GAs know what they're supposed to be spending time on and they can be as effective as possible. And then, of course, departments have the ability to define clear distinctions between these certain duties to make sure that their GAs know what is best for them and how to go about their week at a best basis. So let me send you guys these proposals really quick. It might take a minute or two to get through the thing, but then we can start going over them once you guys receive them. It should be, I just sent it, so it should be in the mail now. And just let me know when you receive those so I can switch to the other presentation here, or the articles themselves.
Which one are you going to start with, Austin?
I'm going to start with Article 10, just to make sure that's obviously the biggest one for us here, and then Article 7 is a bit more technical.
I've got him. Nick came in.
Okay. And I believe I got everyone on your team, but I guess let me know if there's anyone I missed. Okay, so let me get Article 10 up real quick. Okay, so Article 10, as you can see, we've started with this language similar to what you had for healthcare and health insurance, where we believe that this should be effective and work to be implemented as soon as we TA this. Obviously, there are limitations in how quickly you can go from TAing to getting paychecks implemented. And so in this new clause 2 here, you'll see there is a 30-day grace period. In which case the checks after that 30-day grace period the first check after that should be the latest check that has those subsequent changes. We believe that this is a reasonable time frame. Obviously, we're not familiar with your processes and how long that time frame could actually take, but we're pretty confident in 30 days, since it took less than 30 days from the time the last Article 10 was ratified until those were visible in paychecks. So we think our 30 days is reasonable. And then we have the rest of the text should be pretty much the exact same, except instead of healthcare, it is for Article 10. For the minimum stipend, obviously, we've made this concession. We've gone to October 1st. We've essentially given up on 10 months of back pay, which is a huge loss for our GAs, but it's something we know needed to happen to make sure we could work forward with you guys. We've got a 9-month minimum stipend of $29,250, which is 3/4 of this $39,000. Before this was $41,675, so it is a decrease. 10.2 is the new one. This is how it equates to the J1 stipend. So for each year of the agreement, the minimum stipend will be raised to at least what the J1 visa is required. For a 9-month employee, and then for a 12-month employee, it should be at least 4/3 that amount. So it's just, we're equating it to make sure that there is a minimum boundary. a minimum boundary that is set by the University of Florida for these J1 requirements, but a minimum boundary nonetheless to make sure that our GAs can be able to afford to live here. And then for 10.4 here, we have very similar language. We haven't changed anything. So for each year, we have these effective merit raises. We have not changed these amounts here, 2,300 and 1,725. We think these are reasonable. And none of the other language has changed down here. So that's kind of what we're working on. Obviously, there's a lot of room to work here, but I want to just kind of make this apparent. We obviously, as part of this language at the top, we want to work and focus on Article 10 and Article 7 over the following weeks to make sure we can get this done as soon as possible. Similar to how we did with health insurance, we really want to focus and get this done. We don't want to wait 6 months for another proposal. We don't want to wait 1 month for another proposal. We really want to kind of work on this and get this out of the way. We know it's going to be one of the most contentious ones. We know for last year, it took a long time to get something set in stone. And we think if we really focus on this and get this flowing back and forth, maybe get a couple of different counter proposals done in a single session, that we can make some really solid progress and get it done much quicker than we would otherwise, and make sure we can come to a solid agreement. So are there any questions on Article 10 there?
I don't have any questions. I don't know if anybody else on my team. You got any questions? No, thank
Okay, we're going to go on to Article 7 then. So let me just switch my screen real quick. Okay, R7 is a little bit messier just because of how the edits have worked. So as I mentioned, we removed these connections to an average. We're not interested in keeping the word average in there. It's detrimental to graduate assistants that are international. We want to make sure that they can still grieve overwork if they need to, even though they have additional limitations based off of federal requirements. We have this very similar 7.2. I don't think we've changed any of the text here. The only difference here is for the definition here. We've changed it from 1 hour per research credit, from 3 hours per research credit to 1 hour per research credit. We became aware that there is a document being sent out to certain GAs that connects how many hours they can work a week with how many credits they are signed up for. This is on the Student Financial Aid website. And so we looked at that and we realized that was being sent out to some GAs in certain departments, and we kind of reverse tracked it. And, there's not an exact math for how many credits you're signed up with versus how many hours you can work a week, but it was less than 3. And so we've changed it to 1 to get closer to that number that's already being sent out. For the clarification of FTE, this one we've made a couple of edits on, but it's very similar and intact. So within the letter of appointment, all GAs will be given a list of their required duties and their expectations. They will also receive that description whenever the duties change, including changes to course teaching assignment. And they can also receive this upon request by GAU, by the GA, and they can get that sort of description from their department themselves. We've removed this paragraph that outlined going through HR for the graduate school to see if overwork is an issue. That was something you guys didn't agree with in our last proposal, and so we've really limited this and said if there is an issue that it should go through the grievance process pursuant to Article 22. And then we have a very similar outline where if it is determined through the grievance process that the FTE is not in compliance with how much they're supposed to work, we have a couple of options for the university to do within federal law: pay for the additional hours worked on a pro rata basis, reduce the duties to not exceed 20 hours per week, without changes to the FTE, provide assistance for the completion of ongoing work, or the consent is to increase the FTE to match what they've already been assigned to do, or implement another solution. So we don't want to hand tie the university and say, these are the only options you have. But we want to say these are options we think are very solid. And if the GA, GAU, and the universities find another solution that works, then we should be prohibited from doing that solution either. So it gives everyone a little bit more flexibility in each of these cases as they come up. 7.4 is the same as what we had before. It's just review of the workload expectations. So once per year, departments should review what they're asking their GAs to do and make sure that they're within their limits. And they can also take this additional step to define how work overlaps with academic work. And then this section we had deleted before because we had moved it, so that's a section we had gotten rid of. So are there any questions about Article 7 here?
Not exactly about the article, but Austin, would you mind sharing? You said there was a document, a letter that was sent out that you said was somewhat instructive or informing. Would you be able to sort of share that so we know exactly kind of what you're talking about?
Yeah, here I can share that with you in an email, but I can send you. Let me share it with you really quick here. Believe I have it open. Yeah. So this is on the student financial aid website. Even though this is a copy, it's in my Google Drive here, but it is, students are limited if they're registered full time. And it says like for graduate students, how many credits they're registered in and the maximum hours to work without an extension form. This is for an hours extension sort of form. So we kind of took these metrics to see how you could correlate the total credits you're registered for versus the number of hours that it correlates to, and that was less than 3. So that's kind of why we switched to 1. We're open to having a further discussion into, how that could apply. But this was a document we were told was being sent out, and it's on that website. But I will send you a direct link to that over email as well.
Austin, so you're saying the registrar or enrollment management is sending this to graduate students or graduate students on appointment? Because graduate students on appointment have a certain registration requirement related to their FTE as published in the graduate catalog.
I'm not sure I understand your question. All GAs have to be full-time students as well to be able to do this. We're not sure how many people it is being sent to, but we are taking the rough metrics of, credit hours and how many hours per work that opens them up to if they're working less or if they have less credit hours to determine how to find that line between academic and research credits. So we're just trying to find this basis in real life. And you guys may disagree on this metric, but we did hear this is being sent out to some GAs. It's being used. And so we feel that it is being used in some context. We can apply it in this context as well.
I have a question about the article. In line 50, you reference the university will within federal law do one of these 4 or 5 things. Which federal law is that?
So in specifics, that was in reference to international GAs. We don't want to get into a situation where the university is forced to pay them back pay because that admits that they've been working more than 20 hours a week, and that's a violation of their visa. So we want to make sure that everyone has the opportunity to make sure that we are doing right by international GAs, but we're not in any situation where we have to say and back pay them for more hours than they're federally allowed to have.
Yeah, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions from the UF team? All right, Austin, thank you for this. Obviously we need to go caucus. I don't think we're gonna probably have anything for you today. I mean, this is a lot for us to kind of, obviously these 2 articles are articles that we've spent a lot of time talking about already, and there's quite a bit of information in here. I just want to make sure that I understand. So I'm gonna make a statement and then maybe ask a question. I'm relatively sure that we are probably not going to be interested in doing an MOU outside of the rest of full book just for wages. I mean, that's pretty much going to be a non-starter for us. We're going to want to do it as one big thing. Your timing, understanding everything you had sort of said about timing, I want to make sure I didn't misunderstand. Are you saying that that is the only thing, the only way you're willing to go forward is if we do this as a separate pull out? Because I'm telling you right now, that is probably not something that we're going to be able to get behind.
No, that, I mean, obviously, I'm not saying that's the only path forward. That is our preferred path forward, and that's something we
Okay.
want to work forward. And that's something we think is paramount. I mean, we are not interested in a delay of another 6 months to a year to get this stuff done, and GAs deserve to get paid now. And so, if you have another avenue you think we can go through to make sure that people can get their back pay as soon as possible, we're interested in hearing that. But we really want to focus on getting GAs paid and getting their back pay as soon as possible so they can afford to pay rent.
I get that. I guess what I'm saying is that it's not at this point by my count. I mean, we still have a bunch of other articles open.
Mhm.
I mean, these are not the only articles that are open. So, I just obviously if you want to focus on these ones, we're happy to focus on these ones and continue to bring proposals on these ones. But I guess what I'm kind of asking for is what about all the other articles that are still out there for discussion?
Yeah, I'll answer that in just a second. Ava, what did you have to say here?
I was just gonna ask Patrick why their team is not interested in doing an MOU on this article.
Sure. A couple of reasons, but the primary one is that we're not gonna do anything salary wise without it being ratified. Like it's gonna have to be ratified by both you and the bot. So there's no I mean that's pretty much we're not gonna pay a stipend article by itself without it going before the board for consideration.
Right, but we were happy to do that for health insurance. Is that what's the
Yeah,
distinction between health insurance and stipends here then in that sense?
I think there's a number of different considerations. One of them is the fact that just how far in advance we would have had. I mean, we were facing a deadline that would have pushed health insurance all the way to January 1 of 26. Like I said, I think we're just not in a position to actually do changes to stipends without your members also having an opportunity to vote on it. As we want to make sure that we have a passing vote. Unwinding that would be very difficult. I think we were also hopeful that we were going to be able to get the whole thing done before the health insurance would start, whereas this would happen more quickly based on your proposal too. So, yeah, we view them as very different.
Okay. And I mean, obviously we are at different points there. We want, and we know that GAs deserve to have these raises as soon as possible. And that's why we've given in to this October 1st back pay date. If it's something where, you guys are firm that we have to get everything TA'd, I mean, that's your prerogative. I think there are other avenues we could approach where we could try to figure out a way to get this ratified while we are still working on the other articles. I mean, some of them are very contentious. They're going to take time. This one's obviously very contentious and going to take time, but I don't really see the issue of having this discussion, seeing if there is another path where we can get these things done as soon as possible. Regardless of that, and I know you guys will have to think on this stuff a little bit, we are interested in focusing on Article 7 and 10 for the next few weeks. These things are going to be contentious. They're going to take time. And we want to get them done as soon as possible. And we can have this further discussion. Some of the other ones I know we're also far apart on, and those are going to take time as well. But we think really being able to focus and see what's going on and make these steps each week, we can really make some solid progress. And that way we're not delaying these things by another couple of months. Ava, what do you have?
Yeah, I was just sorry. I'm stuck on the idea that we can do an MOU on stipends. It seems, and I don't know, but it seems kind of idiosyncratic that we can do an MOU on healthcare, but not on stipends. And so I wanted to know if there is like any sort of like real policy or law or something that is that says that we cannot do an MOU on stipends?
As I said, we're not interested. I didn't say we can't. And if you look at the way we do it with all of our groups, we don't, I mean, we're in the process of doing it right now. We have reached a TA with UFF. It's going out for ratification before we're gonna do it. I mean, it's not particular to you all. I mean, this is sort of the way that we're interested in going forward. I mean, I can say that very confidently. We're not going to do, during a full book year, we are not going to pull out the stipend article by itself and then pay it without it going through ratification. I mean, I can say that very confidently.
Yeah, and we're not interested in having another 3-month delay after we TA before we get to ratification. And maybe we can work on, you know, making sure that that timeline is quicker. But I mean, last time we ratified, and we had to wait for the board to ratify in December. And, you know, that was our graduate assistants not being able to afford rent, being rent burdened, having to worry about how they were going to eat each week until they could get that back pay, which was obviously never enough to account for all the rising costs of living. But it's just not something that we want to put our employees in again, in that situation again. Jake, what do you have?
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure I'm understanding correctly. So the UF team is saying the idea of tentative agreement on a memorandum of understanding affecting payroll is out. But there's also the idea of like a memorandum of understanding that goes through the ratification process. And that ratification process happens as soon as the TA is reached, while we continue to work on full book. Is that a possibility? Is that what I'm hearing as a possibility? Or is it really just the two options? Full book ratification is the only option, and the option where it's a TA on an MOU, that's completely out. So we have to wait till the entire full book.
I'm not sure I understand all the parts of your question, Jacob, so I'm just going to answer it by making a statement. And if I don't address it, please correct me and I'll try again. So at this point, we want to do all of the remaining open components of the contract with one ratification, inclusive of everything that remains open.
That does answer
Stipends
my
and
question.
everything else.
That
Okay.
does answer my question. That's not the answer I wanted, but thanks for clarifying.
In the shorter term, Austin, if I might also, I think that we probably feel that Article 4 is pretty closely related to this too. I know that it's maybe not quite as closely tied to 10 as 7, but I'm not so sure that we wouldn't want to also, if you want to focus on 7 and 10, I do think that we would also be interested in looking at 4 in the same context. I do think there's some pretty closely tied components in there, at least from our perspective. Maybe you don't feel similarly, but I would offer that for your consideration. And also, Austin, to one of the things that I would say, and I realize that, and you know, and clearly you're able to take the position that you really wanted to focus on health insurance and stipends, you know, but we can be working on, there's nothing that precludes us from working on all those open articles at the same time. I realize if you don't necessarily want to focus on them, but there's nothing that precludes us from working on them. You know, there's nothing that actually precluded us from working on them in this entire interim period. That was a decision that was pretty much unilaterally made by GAU. That was not a decision that we made together. So I feel obligated to sort of put that out and just sort of say at one time. Not that I don't want to belabor it. I'm just going to put that out there for your consideration.
Yeah, and I think our position is, I mean, we're really playing catch up. I mean, when we presented, you know, Article 10 and 7 in February, and it has been a month since you guys gave us Article 10 back. But that was, you know, a several month delay. And so we should have been, you know, passing along Article 10 and having these back and forths over that time period, and we did not have that. And so I think we really, and our team thinks we really need to focus on these 2 articles and make sure that they, at the very least, get caught up and we can get them ratified as soon as possible, because we're not interested in getting everything else TA'd that is closer to, and then still working on these things for a couple of months down the road. We want to get this stuff done, and obviously your team wants to get full book done as soon as possible as well. I'm open to having Article 4 in that mix, focused on them. I think I would still push for us to commit to having each of those articles each time we meet. So, if we have I think we have Article 4 on our side of the table, if I recall correctly. And you can correct me if I'm wrong.
As of now, the only two articles that we have on our side of the table are the two that you just presented by my count.
Okay. So we're happy to bring Article 4 next time, if you guys can commit to bringing Article 7 and 10, and we can trade off on these articles as quickly as we can, and I'm happy to add that into the mix. But we really need to focus on these and get these done. At the very least caught up to make sure that we can get the rest of everything done in a timely fashion. Obviously, the other articles, we still need to work on them, but we have been working on them. And if we have spare time, we can work on those during one of our sessions. But I don't want that to be the main focus. I don't want to spend 2 hours focusing on an article that we're pretty close on and we can get the details on when we can really make solid headway on some of these articles as well. Now to go back to Article 10 and this ratification, just to make sure, I believe this was Jacob's question, but I'm just to double check. There's no scenario in which we TA Article 10 and get that ratified separately by the board?
I'm not saying it's absolutely impossible. We'll talk about it, but I'm telling you that I don't believe that we're going to be interested in that. I'm not saying it's impossible. I just, like I said, as I sit here right now, I don't think that's likely.
Okay, well, we're interested in seeing if that's a possible case. If that alleviates your worry about having this go and be ratified by the board and our team, we're happy to steamroll it, in a separate fashion while we're still working on some of these smaller articles. That's something we can work for. But just let us know how that works out. And yeah, I think it's pretty good. I mean, we're focused on these articles. We really want to get them done. Yeah, and I don't know. I think that's all we kind of have to say on that matter.
So am I right in saying that if we don't have 7 and 10, then you don't want to meet Monday? Is that, I'm not trying to read between the lines here, but it sounds like what you're saying is, look, we're not going to do anything else until we get 7 and 10 worked out. That sounds like
No,
what I'm hearing.
I'm not establishing an ultimatum of any sense. I'm not doing that. What I'm saying is I would highly appreciate if you guys could bring 7 and 10 by the next
Right.
meeting. If you don't, we will work on Article 4 on our end, and obviously we're working on these smaller ones in the background, and we will make use of our 2 hours of time. But not having Article 7 and 10 and having a timely rebuttal on these sort of things, it's going to delay the entire process. And that's going to, affect our mood as we're going into this future stuff. And we really want to get this done. So
I'll
All right,
also
thank you.
say we appreciate if you could give us a heads up before the session, if you can bring 7 and 10 on Monday.
Got it.
So, I also wanted to know why you're not interested in doing this ratification of Article 10 separate from full book. You mentioned that's not something you're interested in.
Well, I mean, it is a full book year. I mean, typically you ratify every you do 2 years, you do reopeners, and then the third year you do full book. Like I said, we were willing to make an exception for insurance just because the timing was such that it would have been literally almost 2 years before the changes could have been implemented. And we felt like what had been requested by JU was something that we could meet. And we did feel like we were able to work with you and get done, not exactly everything that you all had asked for, but pretty close to the things that you had requested. And so we did have interest in trying to get that done again because of the unbelievably long timeline to get all the work done, to get it into the system, to get the networks worked out, to work with all of the insurance partners and the networks, and to make the changes to the program and all the various things that have to go into that. So, I think that was a concession we were willing to make. There's also an issue of just, this is tied to the rest of the contract, and doing stipends or payments or salaries without ratification is just not something I would ever suggest or advise to do, especially if the ratification were to go down. Unwinding that is a disaster. So you know, that's another reason I would say it. Hopefully, like I said, we were hoping with respect that it would be done before the, you know, we're hopeful, we remain hopeful, we hope you remain hopeful that we can get the whole thing done before the end of the calendar year. You know, because it's September, we still have about 3 months, so. But no, I mean, like I said, and I will talk to the team, but I just do not see us being interested in doing a pullout just for stipends and doing a separate ratification and then just allowing the rest of the contract to just be worked on more slowly.
Yeah, Jacob.
Yeah, can you clarify what you mean by unwinding? Because I could understand what you mean if we were TAing and then when it went through ratification, it wasn't ratified, then there's this like complication of unwinding
Right.
pay crate stuff that hadn't been ratified. But when we're talking about something that did get ratified, if a later full book thing doesn't get ratified, that doesn't have any bearing on something that was ratified already, correct?
I'm sorry, can you say it again? I'm not following you, Jacob.
Okay. If it's ratified, then what is there left to unwind?
Oh, nothing. If it's ratified, then then it would be ratified. Yeah, I understand what you're saying. Well, I think we're talking about two different scenarios. We're talking about the possibility of doing it without ratifying it, or doing it as a partial ratification, or doing it as full book. And what I'm trying to say is there's absolutely no way, shape, or form we would ever consider doing it without ratification. Like that's not going to happen. The second thing is I don't believe we're interested in doing it as a standalone partial during full book, but we will talk about that and I'll get back to you. But I can tell you doing it without ratifying it is an absolute non-starter. There's no way we'd be interested in doing that whatsoever.
Yeah, we understood that. And then we were now talking about the idea of a separate ratification. And specifically, Austin asked why your team wouldn't be interested in that. And you mentioned the idea, well, it's full book, so we should just ratify full book. That doesn't seem like a type of position, like that reasoning doesn't seem like, oh, we have to do it just because it's full book. And, you know, this seems like that could be an area for bargaining. So we're wondering why you're so set on the idea that you wouldn't do it as a separate ratification. And you mentioned this other idea of unwinding would be difficult, but I'm saying the unwinding process isn't even relevant to the scenario that we're considering.
I see what we don't want to start ratifying every individual article or this. The stipends is part of the entirety of the contract. Once every 3 years, we bargain the entirety of the contract. We want to bargain the contract together. It goes together. We want to do it together. That is the approach that we would like to take. I appreciate that you guys have a different perspective and you just like to go ahead and do the stipends. And I'm telling you that I just don't think we're interested in doing that. There's nothing that would obligate us to do that. And I don't think we're interested in doing it.
Okay. I mean, obviously, we disagree on that point. Hopefully you can, that when you have a discussion with the team, you can see about the possibility of doing a standalone ratification. That's something that we're obviously interested in and something we think benefits everyone. It doesn't cost the university any extra funding because we have this back pay set up to October 1st now. But the point remains, we're still focused on Article 7 and 10. We're happy to add Article 4 into that mix to make sure we can get those focused as soon as possible. And you know, that's not going to delay the end of full book ratification. That's just going to help us really get these things hammered through. And then we can get those other articles figured out in a timely manner as well. And I mean, we remain hopeful as well that we can get this done by the end of the year. We're just, you know, we don't have time on our side. It's obviously going to be a quick turnaround. And we want to make sure that we can be as efficient with some of these more contentious articles as possible. And that if that means really pushing, you know, lighting the fire under everyone to get, you know, Article 10 done, then we're going to do that. And we're not going to make sure that we aren't tolerant of delaying any, you know, rebuttals to that sort of sense. And we understand we have a lot on our side of the table, and we're going to work hard on those to make sure we can get those to you in a timely manner as well. But in the meantime, we would appreciate this focus.
All right, my team, if we could go caucus, and we will plan on seeing you next Monday.
Sounds good.
All right, bye.
Do you want to stop the recording and then